I retired to Esperance, a quiet coastal town on the far southern edge of Western Australia, on nothing but my social security check, about $1,900 a month. And one thing out here caught me so completely off guard that I still think about it every time I drive past the hospital. But before I get into any of it, do me one quick favor, take a second to subscribe and leave a like. It genuinely helps us out over here. If you've ever run the numbers on retiring abroad and stopped cold at that one word healthcare, then stay right here, because this is the exact thing I was afraid of. I'm Jim, 69 years old, and I've been living out here 10 years now. Long enough to stop guessing about how this country really works. Long enough to give you an honest answer instead of a hopeful one. But this particular thing, I guessed it dead wrong. And I've never been so glad to be wrong in all my life. Let me take you back a little first. Back in the States, I did what just about everybody does. Worked, saved, and watched the winters drag on longer and grayer every year, till the sky went the color of an old nickel from November clear through March. And I sat at that kitchen table running that same check through my head over and over. In a lot of American towns, that money doesn't stretch to the end of the month, let alone to a life by the ocean. So I started looking further out, a whole lot further out than I ever thought I would. And that's really where this whole story starts. Not with courage, I don't want you thinking I'm braver than I am. It started with a number that wouldn't stretch, a winter that wouldn't end, and a quiet little thought that there had to be somewhere warmer where that same check could buy a real life instead of just barely getting by. Somewhere I could sit outside in the middle of July and feel the sun on my arms. That thought is probably why you're sitting here with me right now. But here's what I actually pictured before I ever got on that plane, and it wasn't the sun or the sea. It was a hospital bill. Back home, a good buddy of mine took one ambulance ride, just the one, chest pains on a Sunday, a scared wife, a 10-minute drive to the emergency room, then a single night in a hospital bed, hooked up to a beeping monitor, nothing dramatic about it at all. He was home by the next afternoon, tired but fine. And then the bill came. A few weeks later, in a plain white envelope, that one ride and that one night took a big bite clean out of the savings he'd spent years putting away. The kind of money that's supposed to last you the rest of your days. One ride, one night. And a hole in his retirement he never quite filled back in. So that is the fear I carried across the ocean. 9,000 miles, and it came with me the whole way. I was dead certain that the day my aging body finally needed help out here, far from anything and anyone familiar, on a check that doesn't move a single dollar no matter what goes wrong with me, would be the day the whole dream cracked right down the middle. I'd sit there and do what I've come to call the American math. You probably know the kind. Bracing for a number with far too many zeros on the end of it. Adding up in my head what a bad heart, or a bad hip, or one wrong step off a curb might cost me in a country where, back then, I knew nobody and nobody knew me. That math never once came out kind. Not a single time. After 10 years out here, I've watched newcomer after newcomer get their advice from all the wrong places and then panic over the exact thing I panicked over. So I put everything I actually learned into One Way Guide, my practical ebook over in the One Way Club. It lays the real numbers and the real steps out plain before you leap the honest answers to the questions that kept me up at night in that empty flat. I'll be straight with you though. It won't file your paperwork for you, and it's not for the folks hoping somebody else will make the big decision for them. It's for the ones who want it laid out clear before they go. Scan the code there on the screen, or the link sitting down in the description. And I'll tell you something I never told the people who waved me off at that airport. That fear didn't stay behind. It rode along in the moving boxes. Taped up in there right next to the coffee mugs and the 2 winter coats I knew full well I'd never wear again. I smiled for everyone, told them it would all be grand. And underneath that smile, quietly, I half expected to be flying home broke inside a year. Tail between my legs, a cautionary tale for the fellows back at the diner. So be honest with me for a second. Is that the fear that's been holding you back too? That one word, healthcare, sitting between you and everything you actually want out of these years? Because I promise you, it was the only thing standing between me and this porch. Everything else about it, I wanted so badly I could nearly taste it. The wide sun that just doesn't quit down here, the slower days where the fellow ahead of you in line asks how you're going and actually waits to hear the answer, the smell of eucalyptus coming up off the ground after the rain, a little place by the sea that an ordinary retirement check could genuinely reach, and out here, in that quiet town called Esperance on the far southern edge of Western Australia, it truly can. All of that was real. But underneath every last bit of it sat that one quiet worry. The what if I couldn't quite make myself say out loud. And here's the thing about a worry like that one. It doesn't have the decency to stay a what if forever. The day I'd braced for on that plane, it came. It came on an ordinary Tuesday, just past 4 in the afternoon, like it had been sitting out there the whole time, patient, waiting for me to finish unpacking before it knocked on the door. But before I tell you about that Tuesday, you need to feel what those first weeks were actually like. Because that fear was still sitting inside an unopened moving box, taped shut in the corner of a half-empty flat, the very first morning the cockatoos went off like a car alarm 2 streets back from Twilight Beach. 2 streets back from Twilight Beach, before the sun was properly up, the cockatoos hit like an alarm you can't switch off, and the first thing I did every one of those early mornings was lie there and think about that unopened box and the fear I'd packed inside it. But the days out here made it hard to stay scared for long. Let me tell you about the flat first. Nothing fancy. 2 streets back from the water, a little place with a line out the back where I hung my washing in the salt breeze, 320 Australian dollars a week. Say that slow, because it took me a while to believe it myself. 320 a week for a home, a 5-minute walk from a beach people fly across the world to see. That's less than a lot of folks back home pay just to park a car near their office. A parking spot, and I had a whole life. And the mornings, those cockatoos would go off at first light, this big white racket in the gum trees, and I'd grumble at them like an old man does. And then I'd walk down to Twilight Beach with my coffee and see that water. I don't have a good word for it. Turquoise, sure, but so bright it almost looks fake, like somebody turned the color up too far. The salt on your lips, the quiet hiss of it. And slowly, without me noticing, the dream stopped being a brochure I'd stared at back in the States and just became a Tuesday morning. Ordinary. The best kind of ordinary there is. Then there was Trevor, my neighbor. Big fella with a sun-faded ute parked out on the gravel, the kind of truck that's seen 30 summers and doesn't care. Second day I was there, second day I opened my front door, and there was a tray sitting on the step. Fresh-caught snapper, still cold. And Trevor's leaning on my fence with a grin, sticks out his hand, and gives me a handshake like a vice. Nearly took my arm off. All he said was, "Welcome home, mate. Welcome home." To a man he'd known about a day, I stood there holding a tray of fish I didn't ask for, and something in my chest just loosened. Now, I promised you I'd always be straight, so here's the honest part. It's not all snapper and sunset. The town is small. Real small. The nearest big city is an 8-hour drive, 8 hours, one straight road, through the bush, before you hit anything with a proper airport. And I'll be straight with you, because I promised I always would. The quiet out here is real, and some nights it sits heavy. That's the one thing nobody warns you about. You'll be sitting on the porch, and it's so still you can hear your own heartbeat, and a little part of you wonders what you'd do if something went wrong 9,000 miles from everyone you used to know. I felt that. I won't pretend I didn't. But here's the thing about a small place. It fills back up. A wave from Trevor across the gravel in the morning, a chat down at the jetty with a fella cleaning his catch who somehow already knew my name. The lady at the shop asking how I was settling in and actually waiting for the answer. It happened so fast I almost missed it. The far edge of the world stopped being the far edge of anything and just became my neighborhood, my street, my people. In 10 years, I'd have to look hard to name a place that made a stranger feel at home quicker than Esperance did. So that was the shape of my new life. The washing on the line, the birds, Trevor's tray on the step. And underneath all of it, that box I still hadn't opened, and the fear I'd carried across an ocean, sitting quiet, waiting. And then came the afternoon I'd been quietly dreading for 4 years, a plain Tuesday, just past 4 o'clock. I remember it so clearly, it's almost funny. I was in the kitchen, kettle just starting to tick, nothing special about the day at all, and then something wasn't right in my chest, a tightness. Not a stab, more like a heavy hand, pressing down and not letting up. I stood real still, the way you do when you're hoping it'll just pass. It didn't. Then my left arm went strange, heavy, sort of far away, like it wasn't quite mine anymore. And I knew. Some part of an old body just knows. This was the day. The one I'd packed into that box back in the States. It had finally come to collect. I don't know how I got out the front door, but I did. And Trevor was out on his gravel, and he took one look at my face, and that was it. No questions. He didn't hesitate for half a second. Had me in the passenger seat of that sun-faded ute and the engine turning over before I could even get a full sentence out. I think I tried to tell him I was fine. I think I actually said it, "I'm fine, mate, don't fuss." He didn't even answer, just threw it in gear and drove. And this is the part I'm almost ashamed to tell you, but I promised you honest. Sitting there in that passenger seat, seatbelt across my chest, one hand pressed flat over my heart, you'd think the only thing on my mind would be, am I about to die on a coast road in Western Australia? And that was there, sure. But right alongside it, loud as anything, the old American math started running. Same math every one of us grew up with. I'd watched what a single ambulance ride and one night in a hospital did to a friend's savings back home. Gutted him. And here I was, 9,000 miles from all of that, living on $1,900 a month, my whole check, and I could feel the numbers stacking up in my head. Too many zeros. Way too many. The exact thing I'd feared, finally cashing itself in, right as the ute turned off the main road. Trevor's ute pulled up under the lights of Esperance Health Campus, the sky going that deep dusk blue, my chest still tight, and two thoughts were fighting in my head. Is this the big one? And what in the world is a night in here going to cost a man living on $1,900 a month? I got myself up out of that seat, and I walked toward those sliding doors, bracing for the worst on both. And the first face on the other side of those doors wasn't a desk, or a clipboard, or a man with a payment plan. It was Bev. Silver Bob, reading glasses pushed up on her head like she'd forgotten they were even there. She took my arm the way you'd take an old friend by the arm. No fuss, no drama, and she just went to work. A cuff on the arm, a little clip on the end of my finger, cold pads stuck to my chest, wires running off to a machine, and that green line jumping and beeping beside the bed. "Let's have a proper look at you, love," she said. That was the whole speech. No rush in her at all. And you'd think a man with a tight chest would find that maddening. I found it the opposite. Every calm thing she did quieted one more alarm bell in my head. But only one bell, because the other one was still going, and you know exactly which one. The American math. Lying flat on my back at 4:30 in the afternoon, wires on my chest, and part of my brain was still adding up rooms and tests and specialists, still bracing for a slip of paper with too many zeros on it. Bev decided to keep me overnight. Observation, she called it. So I lay there in the dark of Esperance Health Campus, that green line ticking along beside me, the town gone quiet outside the window, and I waited for 2 answers instead of 1. The first came near dawn. Bev came back in, glasses down on her nose now, reading the strip of numbers the machine had printed through the night. She sat, and she told me straight. It was angina, not a heart attack. My heart was tired, and it had grumbled at me, loud enough to scare the daylights out of both of us. But it hadn't broken. A few things to watch, a small tablet to carry, and I'd be fine. I'm not too proud to tell you my eyes went hot when she said it. 9,000 miles from where I was born, and a stranger with reading glasses had just handed me the rest of my life back. The body scare landed soft, the dream hadn't cracked. My chest let go of something it had been holding since the ute pulled up under those lights. So that was the fear I'd carried across the world. The day my aging body finally needed help, it had come. And it turned out gentle. But here's the thing. That is not the part that caught me off guard. The diagnosis, honestly, I'd half prepared myself for. What I had not prepared myself for, not in 10 years, not in any daydream on that porch, was the bill. Let me tell you plainly how it worked, because this is the quiet fact this whole story was walking toward. When I made the move out here for good, I didn't come on a tourist stamp. I settled as a permanent resident. And in Australia, a permanent resident is covered under Medicare. Not the American thing with the same name. They're Medicare. The public system that catches everyone. I'd ticked that box years ago over a cup of coffee, and honestly, half forgot I'd done it. That one bit of paperwork, done calm and early, was the thing standing quietly between me and disaster the whole time. I lay there doing my panicked arithmetic. Now, here's the part I actually clicked my own life into. The number on that piece of paper, sit with me for it. Because I did finally work up the nerve to ask. Morning light coming through the window, Bev nearby, and I asked her, the way you ask when you already dread the answer, what I owed for the night. They handed me a slip. One little slip. And I stood there holding it, reading it twice because I was sure I'd missed a page. A pharmacy charge. For the tablets. Under $30. That was it. That was the whole night. A bed, the wires, the tests, the watching over, a nurse checking on me till sunup under $30, and every cent of that was just the medicine to take home. Let me put that next to what I was braced for. Back in the States, a friend of mine had one ambulance ride and a single overnight, and it took a bite out of his savings he never fully got back. A night like the one I just had, at home, would have cost me more than my check earns in half a year. Half a year. And here it came to less than a decent dinner out. I stood in that room and I laughed. Quietly, so I wouldn't wake the fella in the next bed. The thing I feared most in all the world had just cost me $20-something. And then Bev did the part I'll carry with me longer than the numbers. It was around 5 in the morning, first light just starting to come gray-blue through the glass. She didn't stand in the doorway with a folder and a checklist. She came and sat down on the edge of my bed. No clipboard between us. No hurry in her at all, same as the night before. She just talked to me, one person to another, like she had all the time in the world for an old American who'd had a fright. And on her way out, she said, "When you leave here, go and get yourself a coffee. The flat white at the little cafe by the jetty is the best in town. Have one on the way home. Love. You've earned it." That's the health system I was so scared of. A nurse named Bev, sitting on the edge of my bed at dawn, sending me off with a coffee recommendation. So let me put the whole thing in your hand the way I'd want it put in mine. $1,900 a month. That's the check. A little flat, 2 streets back from the water, cockatoos screeching me awake, the sea out the front so bright it looks painted. And the one thing I dreaded more than anything, I owned my body giving out on a fixed income at the far edge of the earth turned out cheaper and kinder here than anywhere I have ever lived in my life. Cheaper than home, kinder than home. That right there is the best part of this whole adventure, and I didn't see it coming. So do the arithmetic with me one time. $1,900 a month, a place by the sea. And the thing you're most scared of, a night in the hospital wiping out everything you've saved, take a guess at what it cost me. Under $30. That's what a night cost me. That's what an ordinary check covers. Once you've done the one quiet bit of paperwork early and you're a resident like the rest of the town. So here's what you'd need. Not a fortune, not luck. A regular social security check, a little preparation, done calm and ahead of time, and the nerve to actually go. That's the whole recipe. And it's a lot closer than you're letting yourself believe. As for me, I did what Bev told me. I walked out of Esperance Health Campus into a morning full of sun, drove down to the jetty, and I ordered that flat white. Best coffee in town. She was right about that too.